Hello, and welcome to Take the Stand, Inclusive Leaders. I'm Denis-Smith. I'm the founder and CEO of Obelisk Support, a legal services business, and the founder of the first 100 years and the next 100 years projects, which celebrate the achievements of women in law and diversity. I'm on a mission to make the legal sector a more inclusive place. And so I invited legal leaders who also care about inclusivity to have a conversation with me. This week, I'm talking to Banke Odunaike, Chief Culture Officer with CBRE, a global real estate business. Before taking up this role, Banke was a leader in the company's legal team. Welcome, Banke, to Take the Stand.
Thank you so much, Dana. I'm delighted to be here.
It's wonderful to be able to have a conversation with somebody as passionate as I am about the topic of inclusivity. So to start us off, I wanted to ask you, what does inclusive leadership mean to you?
Inclusive leadership is an awareness and an understanding that diversity of perspective, diversity of thought, diversity of experience actually brings meaningful change. It means being able to, take a step back and appreciate the differences that each individual can bring to the table. And ultimately, or most effectively, what happens is that the outcome or the output of that sort of combined diverse effort is always an exceptional standard to the norm. So inclusive leadership requires for leaders to just, or people generally, you don't have to label yourself a leader, to think more laterally, stepping outside of your own box, stepping outside of your own perspectives, and being willing to learn.
That's great, because you were touching on what my next question was going to ask you, which is, again, going back to leaders, because I do think leadership is, the signal from the top does influence the culture of an organization. What do you think the top qualities of an inclusive leaders are?
Right. Top qualities, I would say the first is empathy. I think you've got to be empathetic to be able to appreciate diverse perspectives. I think you've got to be willing to learn, sort of picture it as not arrogant in your own views, willing to really listen, actively listen to different perspectives, because through doing that, you improve your own knowledge, right? I would also call out that being a truly inclusive leader requires for you to be passionate about difference. It means being able to take a step back and appreciate that, not everyone can look the same, not everyone can think the same, and that there's actually beauty in that difference. I would use this example, Dana, when I was explaining inclusion to my daughter when she was 5 years old. I explained using a rainbow. And I said, a rainbow is beautiful because it's got so many different colors in it. Now, no one would stop to look at and in awe at a rainbow if it was monotone, right? So being an inclusive leader also requires you to be a visionary, for you to be able to see beyond the immediate, see what beauty lies ahead in being inclusive, in stepping outside the comfort zone, in being willing to learn, and in being empathetic to different perspectives.
I love the picture of a rainbow. Actually, it's such a powerful illustration of inclusivity. Thank you for that. My next question is really about you, and I'd love to hear and to get an example of your leadership style in practice, if you can tell us and give us
Yes,
an
of course. Well, my leadership style, whenever I get asked that question, I always think, I don't know that I have a style. I think it's something that just naturally evolved, or it's something that perhaps is innate in me, because right from, even being in school, I would always be given leadership positions. I was always a prefect, I was always a house captain, always this and that. And I think it's a combination of, a willingness or a desire to see fairness, to see, justice being done, but also a passion to do what is right. My kids, if you spoke to them, would tell you that I always talk about integrity. You've got to do the right thing even when no one is watching. So when mommy isn't watching, I want to trust you're doing the right thing. And that's something that my own parents had sort of instilled in me as a young child. So I take that and I have taken that into my career, which is very much, focused on respecting others, respecting self as well in respecting others, on integrity, and in being passionate about the work that I do, and inspiring others to really achieve their own true potential. So I think that comes at that's sort of linked to my passion for being a problem solver as a lawyer. If I work with members of my team and I see where there are gaps or there are holes or there are areas for development, I'm always very keen to help them grow and develop, and to achieve those goals. So I think it's my style of leadership is very much, eclectic. I think I hope it's a good combination, of all that is positive, all that is hopefully inspirational, to the next generation, by combining all of those skills or beliefs that I've always just sort of grown up with.
Moving away now from us as individual leaders to other leaders who might have influenced us in our journeys through our careers, can you think of an example of an inclusive leadership experience that you had that really influenced your career? And why do you think it mattered so much that you had that experience to maybe how you became a leader later on?
Donna, it's a great question, and I will use my current role as a classic example. In fact, prior to my current role, my career journey at CBRE, I have found to be incredibly inclusive. Now, when I first joined the firm, real estate has always been an industry that's not particularly as diverse as we would want it to be. And I joined the firm knowing this about real estate, and also coming from the law, knowing how sort of sparse diversity is in the law. But notwithstanding that, when I joined CBRE, there was talk and there was commitment, right, to changing the landscape. And I felt that commitment, not just through the efforts that were put into graduate recruitment schemes, but also just general visibility, making real estate visible to demographics that typically wouldn't be considering real estate as a career. The way it impacted me personally was when I joined CBRE, in my role as a senior director in the legal function. I was given opportunities. I was challenged. I was brought to the table. I was encouraged, and pretty much pushed outside of my comfort zone quite frequently, but in a way that it was nurturing. It was to develop me further. It was to give me those opportunities to really achieve the things that I wouldn't have, honestly, even put onto the thought as being as part of my career trajectory. And that was consistent. And it wasn't, you were never dumped or pushed into the deep end without a support network to help you get through, obviously, whatever the new challenges were. And I think that in itself is fundamental to any kind of inclusive leadership model. And I've found that leadership in CBRE has been truly committed to ensuring that you set people up for success, you set diverse talent up for success. And I've experienced that, as I said, firsthand. And now in my role leading the culture office, it is exciting for me to be able to further facilitate that, to be able to nurture it, to hear about it, to learn from our employees, on how we're performing and where areas that we could do better. See, I hope I've answered the question, but I certainly, my experience with CBRE was everyone wants their careers to grow, and I've been given that opportunity. Now, look, opportunity will come. You've got to take it. You've got to take the opportunity. You've got to have grit and perseverance, because there will be some knockbacks. But what determines success is how you get back up, right? And you push forward, and how you make the most of every opportunity that's put in your path.
Great points. I couldn't agree more. I mean, there's still barriers though to inclusivity, and I wonder, what do you think is one of the biggest barriers to creating a more inclusive, especially in the legal sector? I mean, obviously you're now looking after a broader industry, but when you look
Mm.
back at the legal sector specifically, what do you think is the biggest barrier to inclusion?
Donna, it's fear. And that's it. From my perspective, it's a fear. It's a fear of the unknown. It's a fear of stepping outside of your comfort zone. It's a fear that you will be overshadowed, right? And we cannot operate, you cannot succeed in life with fear. And so when you take a step back away from all of the metrics and the algorithms and measurements that have been thrown into diversity, equity, and inclusion, and you actually peel away at this issue, it boils down to the human psychology of fear. If we weren't afraid to take the step to bring somebody else to the table, somebody who looks, sounds, has a very different experience from us to the table, if we weren't afraid of that, we would have made so much progress, right? In talking about the benefits of being a truly inclusive operation, right? And unfortunately, what it is even with the evidence, even with all the statistics, we can't get past that because of fear, right? And that fear comes from social dynamic influence, right? Where our societal influences perhaps have created bias. It also comes from, I suppose to some extent, media influence. It is the portrayal of a certain image, a woman who is powerful being, or who is confident being bossy. It's little things that go a very long way to feed the fear. And I think until we as humans are willing to conquer fear and to rise above it and to not let fear stand in the way of our dreams, then we will continue to have this barrier.
To some degree, this is partly answering my next question, which again moves the focus to leadership itself, because I think it is important how we are led to then what level of inclusivity we have in the organization. What should we be doing to improve inclusive leadership? I mean, obviously, overcoming the fear, definitely. Leading with courage probably is one of the messages that came from a previous answer. But is there anything else that you think we can do to improve inclusive leadership?
I think there's an element of being aware, right, of the gaps, being aware. We talked about sort of being a courageous leader. Being able to be a courageous leader requires for you to be able to do a forensic analysis as to your leadership style and to really understand where there are flaws and where there's area for improvement. It's also acknowledging actually where there's fear, right? And once you've done that, once you've been able to identify where are my weaknesses, it's then putting a development plan in place. I mean, we all go through this exercise, don't we, when we do our performance reviews and we have specific goals and things that we want to achieve, and then we measure where we've performed. Let's just take a step away and look at that, maybe perhaps with that same frame of mind, look at how we can also improve ourselves and our leadership styles through development opportunities. So look for opportunities to learn about areas that you feel less confident about. I think there's also a need for leaders to not just go out there and learn, but also to go out there and tell their own stories. I think in being confident enough to step out and share your own story, you learn through sharing your own story because people then share their stories with you as well, right? I think there's a key element to visibility, being a very important factor in able to address the issues.
It's great, because my next question really goes back to this self-reflection.
Yes.
And wondering what you think is the one question somebody who wants to be an inclusive leader should start by asking themselves.
That's a really good question. The one question is why. I would say Why do I want to be an inclusive leader, right? Because I think the why ultimately then determines how sustainable your efforts would be, right? Because if you ask yourself, why am I passionate about inclusion? Why do I want to do this? And the answer is because you want to tick a box, because of your, workplace objectives, etc., then I don't think that you're going to be fully committed to it. But being able to take a step back and say, well, why am I passionate about this? Yes, you might have heard all about the statistics, but if the why and the answer to the why is a passion, a desire to see equity, inclusion, equality, if it is a desire to see societal change, meaningful societal change that is beneficial, that certainly is uplifting for the majority. I'm not advocating for perfection. I mean, there always will be gaps. But if there is a passion for that, when you ask yourself that question, then I think that the commitment to being a truly inclusive leader, to be culturally aware, um, to be willing to learn, to be willing to teach, to be willing to be empathetic, and to listen will all fall into place. Does that answer the question?
I think so. I mean, it's a difficult question to start
Yeah,
with, but
yeah,
as you say, why not start with why?
yes.
It's a really great bit of advice. We've come to our last question, so hopefully it will be an easy one because it is about role models. So I'd love to know, who is your inclusive leadership role model and why?
Oh, wow. Goodness me, I've got so many. It's difficult for me to pick one. Can I pick one that's not professional related, because I don't want to leave anyone out. And I
That's
just pick.
absolutely fine. Equally, you can make up a new role model made up of multiple role models because you can bring why they are role model from different
Well, you know
people.
what? Maybe I'll do this. Maybe I'll do this, Donna. I'm going to say that there are many women in my life who have, well, certainly influenced me as an individual, both from family members through to work colleagues, through to friends like you, who are passionate, just so incredibly passionate about changing the landscape, and for all the right reasons. And so for me, I see each of those women as role models, people that I aspire to learn from, people that I aspire to emulate, in my own dealings. And I think that what I find most inspirational from them is, however little the ripple they're making, it is still a ripple, right? And it's still making some change, to the landscape when it comes to DE&I related issues. So I'm sorry, I couldn't pick one person, but there are many, many women. Now I say that, um, this is such a cop-out answer, because I also have many male allies who have just been incredible support, and have been able to give a very different perspective, at different times in my life. Throughout my career, throughout my career journey, I have always had at least one male ally who would advocate for me, who would give me direction, who would encourage me, to do better. And that I think is it really is a phenomenal thing to have friends and leaders who can be truly sort of, committed and passionate about seeing your career succeed. And for that, I'm truly grateful. I couldn't advocate enough for male allies. They are a very key piece to, inclusive leadership.
I love that because you can surround yourself with role models, is what I'm hearing, and look for them, and they will protect you and help you thrive. So that's really
Yes.
great advice. And thank you, Banki, for coming to talk to us about inclusive leadership and for being an inclusive leader. I'm really thrilled you were able to be joining our video series.
Thank you so much. It's been an absolute delight to join you, and happy to support any way that I can.
I hope you found this conversation interesting and useful, and it's given you plenty of ideas for making your workplace, your team, and organization more inclusive. To find more conversations on inclusivity, you can subscribe to my YouTube channel at Obelisk Support or connect with me on LinkedIn, searching Dana Denis-Smith and heading to my video section. If you have any questions or feedback, I'd love to hear from you. You can also email me by getting in touch at d.denis-smith@obelisksupport.com. Thank you for listening to Taking the Stand, Inclusive Leaders. See you next time.